Okay, so we'll call the special legislation meeting to order. Nino, did you? Got it on? Thank you. This is what I have, let me tell you, let me kind of go with some background, because this is how I'd like to approach this. And for you, Jim and Paul, my expectation is we're not going to vote, but that we can begin this discussion and see where it goes. As we've been planning, you know, actually I think I talked to John about this maybe about 5 years ago, but when we've been planning the bicentennial, so we've been a community for 200 years. We've been a city for 70-some years. And as I've been at the bicentennial meetings and we've talked about parades and events and a lot of fun activities, I started to think about other responsibilities that might be good to think about during this exceptional year. And one of them was to look at some of the structures that we have. The framework that we build that provides services is an evolved framework. You know, it started at some point, and as years go by, the framework may change, or it may no longer support or satisfy the purpose that it was built for. So it might be a good time to look at those things that are structural, that we take for granted, that move along year after year, decade after decade, and ensure that are we really meeting the purpose and being satisfied with the outcome of what's been constructed over that period of time. One of my concerns, my issue that I addressed is term limits, and as I studied it more, really kind of reconfigured it to an idea about extended term limits based on the argument, if you term limit people out early, they really don't have time to catch on, to learn how the system works, and to implement things that they think are important. And so, as I looked at it and read about it, I found that many communities have gone to what they called extended term limits. Extended being you have a longer period of time before you term limit out. For example, if city council had a term limit of 3 terms, that would be 12 years. And if you look at, historically, I think many people have 2 years or 3 years is probably done enough. But whatever it is you come in with an expectation to accomplish, other than, I think, the routine, the things that we do week in and week out to keep the gears working, you could probably accomplish them in 12 years. My concern about the mayor's position is a little bit more difficult to deal with. Historically, the city only ever had a 2-term mayor. And when I was mayor and my time was up after 2 terms, I had an expectation that I would be replaced by somebody else. And what I ended up being replaced, was by somebody who was elected 3 terms and ran for 4. Now, if you had a 3-term mayor who was that great, benevolent, kind, generous, hardworking, cooperative, well, let's let them have 3 terms or 4 terms. But the flip side of that is you can also get that chief executive that is less than exceptional and can get reelected, and you have them 1 term or 2 terms or 3 terms or 4 terms. So the basis of what I am looking at is, and why I brought this up, is I believe that we have people in the community that are probably bursting with new ideas, that have things that they'd like to express, things they'd like to implement, that would like to participate in our city government. But the reality is, it's tough to beat an incumbent, somebody who's been in for quite a while. If you have good name recognition, anybody on the outside looking in is going to say, okay, this is going to be hard work, it's going to cost me a little bit of money, and the odds are I probably won't win. Most of all, though, it's not inviting. When you look at a structure where folks can stay for 2, 3, 4 terms, or stay for decades. Now, maybe this isn't the way to deal with it. My concern, my larger concern is, and that's why I brought the term limits up, is a lot of us, I think a lot of us here, I guess, are at the point we have participated in or we're familiar with really Medina's renaissance and when Medina became a more contemporary city, the restoration in the 60s, the development in the 80s, we have this golden age going now. A lot of us are kind of on our way out of here, and so that historical knowledge is gone. And what would be a good thing to have would be to have a good supply of folks that were excited and engaged and energized to begin to work themselves into this process that we have, so that when we step down, they can come in and they can take our place with not only relative ease, but with some better knowledge of what has come before and what's the expectation of how you're going to perform. And when I look around, I don't see those people. And of all the time I've had on council, probably the biggest disappointment, maybe the only real disappointment I've had, is that I have not seen folks coming up who come to a meeting or engage with us because they want to come and become part of this city government. So, I think that there are folks that would be great, elected leaders. I think that new people bring fresh ideas, they bring a newer perspective, and I don't see these folks coming forward, and I'm not sure that we haven't put up, because we have no term limit, I'm not sure that we haven't put up sort of a roadblock to that happening. If there was a better way to do it, it's not term limits, I'd be a good way to go. If we can engage more people in this process so they can be ready to take our place. But I don't see that happening. Now, some people do it of their own volition. Adam Frederick and I both ran for an open seat on county commissioner. Adam and I are politically, we live on different poles, but we got to know each other, and I have a lot of respect for Adam. And early on in the campaign, Adam said to me, I'm running for county commissioner. If I win, I'm only going to run 2 terms and I'm done. And he was really basing that on that historical notion that in communities like we have and in county commissioners, there is that citizen legislator. You're not going to become a full-time politician. I'm not going to do this for the bulk of my adult life. And Adam has run 2 terms, and he's not running again. On the flip side of that, there is a commissioner who I think was elected in 1992, and I think that term runs through 2021. So I think that's 29 years, which really ties up a seat. And when you tie up a seat like that, you are discounting the possibility of anybody coming in that has different ideas or different perspective or wants to do something different. So how do you deal with that, not have term limits, and at the same time promote some accessibility, foster younger people coming up, make it easier for younger people to come and run for elective office? Because the reality is, it is not an easy thing to do. So I thought it's something we've never really gotten from the Charter Review Commission. Since I had experience with the Charter Review Commission, all good people, they would look at a process, and the finance director in particular, when I was mayor, the finance director position when I was mayor, and council wanted to make it a position that was appointed by the mayor, and the Charter Review Commission never came back with appointed by the mayor. And almost every administration I've had contact with has wanted to change that position, and it simply has never happened. And my sense when we did it this time was, one of the best things we could do as a legacy for the city as we leave would be to change that position and get that in place so that we can operate as a more functional business entity in this political system by having an administrator who is beholden to the mayor and city council because he's hired by the mayor and part of the administration. And that has never happened. And I don't see that happening unless city council took the initiative and simply said, this is what we're going to do, and we put it on the ballot. When I was elected mayor, I had lived in Parma Heights, and the mayor of Parma Heights was a guy named Paul Cassidy. And my father was part of the city stuff, and so they were friends, and he was a friend of my family. And I think the day after I was first elected in 1981, I got a phone call the next day, I think, from Paul Cassidy. And he said one of the scariest things to me, I think, that I've ever heard. He said, you know what, after he congratulated me, he said, you know what? He said, once you're in for good. He said, you are in for life. And I was like 28 years old, and I had no intention of being in for life, you know? That wasn't what I wanted to do. And of course, Paul Cassidy, close to really your grandfather, Paul Cassidy was the mayor of Parma Heights for 43 years. So anyway, that's my objective. So I had these were what I saw as an objective. And if you can meet it without legislation, if we can come up with some, you know, brainchild of how we can better mentor and bring folks in so that they are up and ready and we have a supply of people to participate, you know, that's fine as well. So I had these things. One was to expand elective office leadership, the opportunity for elected office, because I think it's very difficult here because we have these seats locked in. Allow new and fresh perspectives, motivated individuals interested in public service. Provide more options for voters. When you have no opponent, it's nice to think I don't have an opponent because I do a great job, but I may just not have an opponent because somebody doesn't want to, you know, looks at it and goes, nah, I don't think I can do that. So the voter really doesn't get a choice. They just mark the box because you're the only person on the ballot. Keep a steady, fresh supply of leaders to serve an elective office. You know, work to get some people coming up through the process. Younger people, provide some opportunity for younger people who don't know. I mean, campaigning nowadays is not like it used to be. Campaigning is a bit of work. You have to kind of know what you're doing. It's a process if you want to win, and if you don't know the process, you're not going to win. And help younger people that you can enable them to participate. And lastly is diversity. One of the oddest things I think in many areas of our community and other communities is that there are so few women, there is so little diversity, male, female, in our government. 51% of the population of Medina is female. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot come up with more than 9 women who have ever been on city council in the history of the city. Maybe it's 10. But if you think about 50% of the population, 51%, you would think that there would be 3 or 4 women on city council. People of color is a little tougher because we have the demographics of the city, we have so few, but we've only ever had 1 person of color on city council. And those seem to me like good objectives if we could begin to address those in some fashion. Now, if we think it's worthwhile and we want to wait till the next Charter Review Committee, can make a pitch for it and see if the Charter Review Committee says that's a good idea, let's do that. Or we can try to just get together as we are, as pretty smart individuals, and see if we can't focus on this for the time that we have. By law, we can't get together and just meet. And so I saw this as a good forum to talk about some issues that we usually don't have time to talk about because we're busy just doing the nuts and bolts. If we can come up with some other way to address this issue. And the only one I can think of is to have some specific goal of mentoring, maybe through, not just through, I'm going to appoint you on a committee, And then you're just on the committee, and I'll see you if I come to the committee, we have a lot of committees and commissions. But to specifically try to mentor folks, to engage them so that they will become interested in coming on board and becoming part of the elective process that we have in the diocese. So that's pretty much my thinking on the issue. And I appreciate you guys coming, because it's great to have the opportunity so we can talk about something that, like I said, we have not talked about. So, Jim, do you want to, got any comment?
No, I mean, I guess the one thing I think the administration does a nice job on is trying to recruit people to be on committees, on planning commission. I think that's your best way to get people interested in government and see how it works. And I think the mayor does a great job of reaching out to people always that have either run for office or shown some interest to try to get them connected to different committees. So I still think that's a decent way, because people, it's a big jump to just decide you want to run for council or any elected office. It's a big undertaking. So I remember when I first got on council, Roger Smalley said to me, start looking for your replacement, because you want to be able to turn it over at some point so you don't do it forever. And I'll tell you, many times over the years, I've talked to people that live in my ward, and I can barely get them to serve on charter review or on a committee, let alone having somebody who really, I think, is a good, decent person that cares about the community and would do a good job. But they don't have a lot of interest in doing it. I think it's kind of a thankless job in many ways, and they don't want to put themselves out there and subject themselves to criticism and having people upset with them. And so, I mean, I always try, whenever I talk to somebody that has an interest in government or has an interest in the city, trying to get them involved. And I think that's all of our jobs, is to get people involved and have them be a part of the process if they're interested.
Thanks. Yeah, and I understand the mayor does a good job. I think everybody tries to find people, because that same issue comes up with committees and commissions, is it's so hard to find people that want to serve. I mean, I'm on a Shade Tree Commission with Virginia Genderman, who Virginia's
She planted the first tree in Medina.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Genderman, has been.
She's been around for a while. She's a great lady.
She is a great
She's a
lady,
great
but I
lady.
mean, school board, city council, at Shade Tree, and she still comes to the Shade Tree Commission meetings, and participates. See, I look at that, I guess, two ways. One is we do all we can do to try to get people on committees, but then I also look at Virginia Genderman, who in her 90s, still on the, she's still on the committee because it's so hard to find anybody else that wants to be on the committee. That's where I think the mentoring, what you said is what Roger Smalley said, you start to look for to bring somebody up to take your place and then hope it works. Paul?
Well, I agree with Jim. It is difficult to get people to serve on committees and things like that, and agree with the mentoring. I became interested in city council back in the early 2000s. Stu Borden, some of you may remember him, one of the bald-headed guys. Okay, he and I worked on Forest Meadows Lake Park Association together. We traded off president, vice president, and he suggested, he took me to a couple of meetings, and I started getting interested in there. Started talking with Jane. I got appointed to the BZA, and then I learned that Linda Huffman-Joseph wasn't going to run anymore, and I ran for her position. But it was because I had an interest in what was going on with the city. I had somebody to drag me by the hand and plop me down at city council meeting. So I think that's what we need to do, is go out and invite people to come. Let them see what we're doing. I make it a point when somebody comes to our meetings here or upstairs to thank them for being here, to learn what's going on. I've asked a couple of people who are regulars, and they're like, they don't want anything to do with this part of it.
Yeah.
They don't want to put themselves out. They don't want to be the one who's going to be the quote whipping boy. Please don't take it the wrong way. That's just an old phrase. Okay. They don't want to be the whipping boy for something that goes wrong in the community. That's plain and simple. Those are the people that I've talked to. Other people, they don't want to spend their time in meetings. And we do spend a lot of time in meetings. Okay? They just don't want to do it. Those are the things that I got. As far as the election goes, I had 3 people come up to me. One actually pulled the petitions to run against me. And his admission, his petitions never left his car. 2 women came up to me and says, I was gonna run against you. The one said, but I just didn't. And the other one says, we think council's doing a good job. Okay, so 3 people considered it, but didn't.
Right.
Okay, so I'm not sure how term limits are gonna change that attitude at all, in that I just didn't want to. I did pull petitions out of the car, okay? And if you do put the term limits on, and you do have a good team, you know, you look at any team that you have in sports, in music, in anything, they move things forward well because there's consistency. And there's a good, well-oiled team going together. You take one element out of it for whatever reason, and it just blows it up. I know the one account I was on 2 accounts ago, there was nothing that we couldn't do, the 5 of us couldn't do to keep that customer happy. We were just moved together well. One guy got a promotion, and it just blew up. Because I knew what Matt was thinking, Matt knew what was Ben thinking, and Teresa knew what everybody else was thinking, and she told us what we were thinking a lot of times. But, you know, we worked together well. Teresa got a promotion, and boom. Okay, so it's something here, I guess the residents need to be able to decide. If they like what's going on, then, okay, then they make that decision, do I want to run or not? If they don't like what's going on, they have that same decision, do I want to run or don't I want to run? Okay, and I think if something is going bad, the responsible resident would, and that has propensity to run for office, will. And if things are going good and they want to leave it running good, they won't, plain and simple. Because that was one comment that I made early on. I would not run against somebody who's doing a good job in the position that they're in. Okay? I'm just one of those. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And I hear exactly what you're saying, it's all true. I guess what I'm looking at, though, beyond that is if you look at many boards and commissions and in groups, many of them have like a so many years and you're out. And they don't do it because people aren't doing a good job. It's simply because they don't want to have a board of an association or a nonprofit of 20 people that are still the same 20 people. They want to bring in, they want to refresh the board and bring in new people. And I guess when I look at term limit, the one thing it does is at some point in each slot, that it empties that ballot out. I mean, so that ballot is, there is nobody in that seat. So then I think you have an opportunity, if you're looking at it and you're not familiar with campaigning and you're new or you're young, I could run for that. Not because I'm going to do a better job necessarily than the guy who's still on, but I have ideas too that I'd like to share and kind of get those ideas out. But I also like a lot, one that you mentioned, of course, when you were you came into it, you were 2 things. Somebody brought you into it and you were interested in doing it. And what Jim said is, Roger Smalley said, look for your replacement. And I don't know if any of us have done that, thought about it in that way. But I do know when I look around that, you know, we're all at some certain place where there will at some point be, you know, a lot of vacant seats, and that we've not prepped people to come or brought people further than the committee process. Like you said, a lot of people want to serve on things like the planning commission or some commission because they're really interested in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, they don't want to come and do this. But we have 20, you know, we have thousands of people out there that it seems we could engage them, that they would see the benefit of their participation to the community. I mean, you see the benefit of what you do.
Right,
Jim
but
does.
don't we see that, don't we see the members of the community coming to the ward meetings that we have 4 times a year? Okay, the crowd has been growing, but in each meeting, and it grows proportional to the number of problems that are in that particular
Right,
area.
right.
But, and those are the same people who show up at council meetings periodically, but nobody showed up at the Board of Elections with the, you know, petitions filled out. Okay, that's, and I don't know that having I don't want to say, a term limit, if you will, is going to change that level because of, they're just interested in what's going on, but they don't want to take a part in it, an active part in it.
Right. You know, I really hadn't thought about it, and Jim, you probably know the details of it better, but it does appear that when school board openings appear, when there's a school board election, it does, I guess just what I'm thinking I saw is that more people people do seem to run for those school board seats.
Yeah, I think it depends on where things are at. For a lot of years, they had a hard time finding anybody who wanted to do it, and then I think the last couple times, there's been enough interest and issues going on that people wanted to be part of it. So it ebbs and flows, I guess,
Yeah.
with how upset people are with things.
Well, and I agree with you, Paul. I think that, people have a perception, that the city's being run well, they're getting what they want, and they don't want to be involved. I guess that's,
Actively involved.
yeah, actively involved. I guess that has a lot to do with it. I mean, so what I'm hearing so far is not. John, did you have a question?
What I've noticed throughout my years is that when I first was interested in council, of course, I went for an appointed position. And there were 13 people who ran for that appointed position. Now, that just tells you, and it tells me, as years went on, when we had other appointed positions, we had a half dozen people, maybe 8 people. Everybody's interested in an appointed position, but nobody's willing to take the step, as everybody said, to go out and run an election. I'm not sure why that is. I think it's very difficult to run an election. As you mentioned, it's a lot of work. And I think people see an opportunity to get in if there's an appointment and they say, well, I'm going to throw my hand in because I got an equal chance as everybody else. I don't have to go through a whole election and have to go through the process and put myself out there, so to speak. But I think it's accountability on both sides. I mean, we make an effort, maybe not a strong enough or a good enough or well enough effort that we should to bring people along, but they have to be willing to come along. And I don't see a lot of people willing to step up and take that interest in council. You have to have the interest and drive of it. A lot of people going through the appointments ran for council because they just wanted to get on, but they didn't have the passion, I guess, that I think this elected position takes. Because you got to be passionate about the position, otherwise you're not going to be effective. And most people don't seem to take that next step. And that's why I don't think you see a lot of people ever getting engaged, is because they want to be involved, but they want to be involved on their time. When a position like we have, you're involved, it doesn't matter what time it is, you're involved and you have to be there. So I think it's a good challenge to try to figure out how do you find those people who truly have a desire to get involved, to keep them involved. Because, like I said, the people who ran for the appointed office, none of them really ran for an elected, when it came up again, ran for elected position. So, did they have the really desire to be on council, or was it just an opportunity to be on council? You gotta find the people who actually really want to be on council. How do you do that? That's my question. Because I see the difference. There's a lot of great people who serve on committees, and maybe that's all they want to do. Maybe that's their ambition, is to contribute back in public service on a committee level. And then there's select people who want to be on council, be the mayor, but there's not many of those people out there. Through the years, we have seen people run, but then they disappear. So I don't know what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting that, you're right, I hadn't really thought about the number of people that do, kind of queue up for an appointment, if you can get appointed. But that does play back into it is hard to run.
It is, so does that mean that?
Of course, the good thing
people-
about running a campaign is, you learn a lot about, and hopefully engage with people.
Right.
That you're going to represent, but I had not thought about the appointment, you're right.
But I've noticed that every time we have an appointment on council, you'll get a half a dozen or more people come out.
Yeah,
And you don't even know where they come from.
hopefully from Medina.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes they show up. and say,
Occasionally,
"Where's-"
people say they're going to run for an office.
We ask them, did you ever
They're
go
not
to the
from
city hall?
Medina.
Like, where's the city hall? But I think you're right. I don't know how do you identify those individuals that really have the desire to be a public servant? I don't know the answer.
I guess that's, if we took that route, though, I guess then I would want us to come up with some way to actively think about, engage, like, okay, how do you do that? I mean,
But
we
we've
all.
been doing a lot more engagement on council and administration ever since I've been on council, going out in the communities now. Never did that. But we get a little bit of engagement. Same people come to all the meetings.
Yeah.
They come to both meetings. It's only this a dozen people. There's really nobody, and I don't know if that's just people are frustrated with government in general. They just don't want to get engaged. They're too busy with their kids, family. There's something that keeps them away. Unless there's a big issue that affects them directly, and of course they're involved.
Right.
But we can't be one-issue people. We can't find somebody that's a one-issue person, because that's ineffective government in my mind. You gotta have somebody that's willing to look at all the issues and have an input in all of them, not just, well, I don't want this to happen in my neighborhood, and once it's solved, okay, I'm done.
Right,
I mean, that
right,
doesn't really
right.
help.
Well, one thing that we have to look at too is the unintended consequences of term limits. What if we come up to filing day and nobody files? What do we do then?
We had that. That was Bob
Okay,
Mailing.
then-
Bob Mailing was a write-in candidate, Ward 3,
Okay,
because nobody ran for the seat.
okay, that we have the write-in candidate, if we have no write-in candidate, and then council appoints. Okay? Then what? Okay, we've taken the right of the voters away, because nobody was elected. They were
But that was
appointed by
kind of
council.
odd back, that was in the mid-90s, I think, or 99.
I think I remember that. He was an air, was that the airline pilot?
No, he was a
That was
HVAC
Mr.
guy.
Strachey.
He was an engineer.
Oh,
Mr. Stravey was a pilot.
And he was a write-in candidate, because nobody ran in Ward 3. There was nobody interested in running.
And that could happen, but I think generally, in most communities, that's probably an anomaly. I mean, there would probably be people like being appointed. I mean, if nobody's running, that'd be a great time to run.
What?
You've got the vacant seat. Denny?
A couple things. Well, one, I'm totally not in favor of term limits, not just for this body. I'm not in favor of term limits statewide or national. In Medina, I mean, I'm in my fourth term, halfway through my fourth term. And what made me run again each time, the first time I was talked to by Jane Lever saying, hey, Virginia Ginnivan has decided not to run, would you consider? And I said, yeah, I'll think about it. So I started coming to meetings. And I probably came to about 6 months worth of meetings before it was time to actually file. And I thought, boy, this is something I was really interested in. So then I went, I did file, and there was 3 people running against me. But I went ahead and went to newly elected officials training, just by chance if I won. And when the bulk of that was through Ohio State, the bulk of the information I got from that was, if you're elected, day one, you have to be ready to go. Because nobody's going to give you a hand up, nobody's going to give you any information. The day that you take the seat and take the oath, there's going to be legislation put in front of you that you're going to have to be aware of. That scared me. And then I won. What kept me running the next 3 times is because as a body, we had started accomplishing things that I was really excited about, and still am today. That at the end of my term, it still wasn't complete. And I ran one time unopposed, so in 3 other elections I was opposed. And I was really hoping, I hope I get reelected, because the one initially was the parking deck behind the courthouse. And I mean, there was just, and the same thing now. There's some economic development issues that if I was to be elected to, have to run again this year, I would probably run again, because there's just so much opportunity that I'm excited about. As far as getting other people involved, I don't know how we can do that any better, because since I've been on council, we have Armstrong Cable that's available to us, and not only plays every council meeting, it plays every committee meeting and finance meeting. And I know that there's people, because when I run into them at Bueller's, hey, I saw you on television the other night, blah, blah, blah. So I know people are getting engaged. but I don't see anybody coming to the meetings. And it bothers me, because, you know, I've known some people that, since I've been on council, that have been elected, that never came to a meeting prior to getting elected. And even though I attended those meetings prior to my first election, I still had such a huge, you know, maybe it's because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, I still had a huge learning curve, and if it wouldn't have been for people like Pam Miller, John Coyne, Jim Shields, it would probably take me at least 2 years, if not longer, to where I would sit down and when we're going through the budget process, feel comfortable with what I was doing. Not that that's an excuse or that's the main reason that I'm not in favor of term limits. The same thing with the finance director. You know, we can get stuck with a finance director that we are not happy with. We have a voice, just like we have a council have a voice. When somebody asks, how's Bill Lamb doing? I would never come out and say, boy, he's doing a terrible job. But I could very easily say, I really don't pay that much attention to Bill. And anybody with a half ounce of brains would sit there and say, hey, he's not a Bill Lamb fan. Same with any position. The mayor, I really don't pay much attention about the mayor. Or when somebody asks me about the mayor, which I think Dennis has done a great job, I say, you know, as the CEO of the city, I don't think you're going to get anybody better. The bottom line, I want the power of the vote. If there's, and I always said, if somebody wants to run against me, that's great. If they've got the true interest of the city and they want to come to meetings and put the time in and they want to run against me, God bless them. I mean, like I said, I hope they have the same passion that I've had. But I still want it up to the voters to decide he or she is not doing a good job. And I think they can, by the way that the city operates, our sanitation service, our economic development, our police, fire, EMS, all the things that people are concerned about, leaf pickup, streets, they are, and that's when we have our work meetings, that's what they are concerned about. I mean, you know, if those are going good, we're doing a good job as council members. And even though it's not council, it's the CEO of the city and his department heads. But if for some reason they see whether, you know, maybe it's they don't like the new restrooms that we built, there can be some reason that they're going to say, that person's not a good steward of my tax dollars. And he or she, I want somebody else to run it. Maybe I'll run against him or her. But I still want it up to the power of the voters. I understand exactly what you're saying, that, you know, if I don't run again, somebody else is going to fill my seat. Hopefully it's going to be somebody that takes an interest in the city and will have the passion that I've had. But I want it up to the voters. That's all I have to say.
Don't get me wrong, though. I mean, I'm not aiming this at anybody here. I'm
No, I'm not
talking,
saying-
or Keith. You know,
No,
my point about
no,
finance was that has been a decades-old problem, that you are you're the head of an administration, but you don't have control over the person who is delivering your financial information. You know, this had nothing to do with Keith. This started a long time ago. And that's what I meant by a structural change. I mean, when you see that go to every charter review commission, I mean, that same, every administration pushing to do this, and here we are, you know, we can't make that change. Laura, any comments?
Well, as much as I think when things are not going particularly well, a term limit is a good thing to have. If things are going well, I don't know that removing somebody with historical knowledge is the best thing. When it comes to cultivating new people and new ideas, there are people that I know want to run and they want to get involved, or at least they say they do. I've invited them to every single council meeting. Every one of them, I've given them a notification that this is about to happen, and still don't see those faces. So that concerns me. If you tell me that you are interested in the position and you still don't show up to find out what the job entails, then it's a little concerning. I don't think it's a bad idea for don't know if it's an individual thing or if it's also as a council reaching out to younger people who, are interested in government and trying to get them on board and get them into the committees and hopefully make that jump. But you're all absolutely right. It is a very interesting thing to run in the campaign. You have the time-consuming aspect of not only the campaign, but once you're done, and there's a lot of people who just really don't want to make that time commitment. So I'm not really sure how to change it.
I don't want to drag this out, but I am interested in some other opinions. What is it that you think, what is the difference between coming to, when I was here, people came to a meeting. I mean, you physically had 15 people show up at a meeting because they wanted to hear what was going on, because there was no, it wasn't on TV, it wasn't broadcast. You physically showed up. So you had that, it's not tactile, but you had that eyeball, we're sitting with each other and we're talking and these are the issues. And now, exactly what Denny's saying, people will stop in Bueller's and say, I saw you on TV at 1 o'clock, and I always think like, seriously? You watch that?
Either infomercial or council.
Yeah, there's no question.
That
People do watch it.
people do watch it, but what is the difference of the engagement then if you're, I'm home sitting in a chair watching us on TV compared to, is the engagement different if you're in the room and you're able, you could, if you wanted to, you could get up and you could do that. You've made an effort to go out, and on the other hand, you haven't made an effort to go out, you've just turned on the TV.
Chris, I will tell you, as much as I love that people tell me they watch it, the one thing I love about our ward meetings is people tell me they like to come to those because there's no TV, and it's easy to ask questions and talk and not have everybody in the community watch if you goof up or ask something inappropriate or look like you don't know what you're talking about. So that's why I love the ward meetings.
And the discomfort of having to stand up at that microphone.
An unintended consequences of televised
Yeah.
meetings, I never thought of that.
I've had several people say that. That's why they love our ward
You're
meetings
asking
so
for the
much.
address, their
Valid point.
name, and
Well, and you see people when they get up to talk, and some people can just go ahead and talk, it's no problem. For a lot of folks, that's a,
The other thing that people love at our ward meetings, they've told me, is that we go around the room and give everybody a chance to say something. Like, they don't have to stand up even, it's very natural for
they
them
don't
to
have to
talk.
put themselves out there.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, you haven't had too many folks voice too many concerns at the most recent meetings because it seems like they're
But
satisfied.
they really appreciate being
No, they
asked.
do. I understand.
So,
I
I
think
love those ward
technology
meetings for
has a
that
place
purpose.
in that where folks are at home and watch it on TV, they can email, they text, Facebook. So,
And the advantage of physically coming to a meeting, and I've seen people do it, is they may not say anything during the meeting, but after the meeting's over, they may approach the mayor or one of the department heads or the police chief and ask a question or, come up with a concern that they didn't want to get up to the microphone about.
Right.
Which is another thing that goes along with the word meetings, they have that comfort level.
I've never been a big fan of term limits, particularly myself, but I have been looking at, like I said, the lack of folks coming up through the ranks, the lack of, participation. My concern, lots of things that I come up with, I don't come up with. Somebody at church talked to me about doing something about a year and a half ago, and we're gonna start it in a couple of weeks. It wasn't even my idea, but it turned out to be a great idea, simply because I had a conversation. How do you engage people to get those other ideas? And like I said, don't get me wrong, I'm not aiming this at I'm not aiming this at people. I just think it's good to look at where we are, because I would really like to see us engage somehow, younger people, or people that would be interested, and I still have a hard time in my head, the reality that there are so few women participating. Historically, it just hasn't happened, and I understand why it didn't happen in the 50s or the 60s, because it was sort of not, it wasn't your place, you were able to do it. When my wife went to get a loan for her house, at a savings and loan here in Medina, early on, they told her that she should bring her husband in, go get your husband, because you needed a man to sign that paper. But nowadays, it seems like we should have been moving a little bit more progressively, but it seems to be the same thing. If you don't run, you can't get elected. And so we don't have that, that diversity that we have talked about on occasion. We end up being, 7 middle-aged white guys.
So when are you resigning?
Tonight.
Okay.
But Bill, I also think that at the local level, I mean, I loved every woman that I worked with on council, in my
Right.
tenure. But on the local level versus the state and national level, there's not as many issues that come up that we deal with as a council that I would consider men or women issues versus, like I said, in the state there are.
Right.
And definitely in the national there are. A woman's perspective is, when I've been on council, is not really differed much from her male cohorts. And like I said, I'm all for diversity, 110%. But at the local level, I'm not saying it's not important. I hope every woman that would want to run, would run, whether it being it's me, Coyne, you, whoever. But they have to have the interest, and it's not going to be a gender issue, and it's not going to be issues that would come up at the state or federal level. So maybe that's why we don't have as,
Yeah, we're kind of gender neutral, huh?
Yeah, there
I
you
mean,
go.
our issues, I suppose they sort of are.
Plus, if you look at the time we're in, there's not very many households that the man and woman aren't both working.
Right, right.
At least up until close to retirement age, or the kids are at least going and out of
Right.
college. So it does differ than back when you were mayor and before that. Seriously, I mean.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm,
You know what we could try to do one time and just see what kind of participation you get, is just to have like a meeting to say, people interested in government, getting involved in government, not only on the committee level, but getting involved at some time in running for a position, just to see who shows up. I don't know if you're gonna get a lot of people showing up, but at least you'll know what people, what they're thinking. Because
That's a good idea.
yeah.
otherwise, I don't know, how do you get people to do things? And the only way is what Denny said, somebody has to actually pull you and grab you by the hand and say, come with me. Otherwise, you're not coming.
That's part of it. The other part is you gotta be a willing participant that you want to be involved in. That's the type of person Denny was, that he came and learned about it, but he's also a person who lived here forever. He's been involved in things, and he has a sense of obligation of wanting to give back. That helps a lot to want to do this job.
Public service is not for everybody.
Plus, when I was a kid, I used to go up to Hales for the round table. I wasn't invited in the round table, but I would sit close by so I could hear what was going on, so I was always interested in.
Mayor.
Thanks. So I just had a few points. One is the one John just covered. I think there's a false assumption that there's a whole group of people dying to get into public service. There's a great deal of people who want nothing to do with public service, not if it was the last job on earth, because they just don't want the hassle, they don't want people complaining, their work already is stressful enough. I think at this time in our lives, with everybody having the iPhones, they're always reachable. I mean, people are much busier, and most people working are not working 40-hour work weeks anymore. It's 50, 60 hours of work, and taking the children to sports and everything else. And oh, by the way, do you want to come in for $3,000, $6,000 a year and take part in these meetings that are going to be multiple times every month? So, I'm not certain that that's a legitimate assumption. I also feel strongly that who better to decide the leadership of the city than the voters instead of the council. Now, if the voters decided on term limits, was placed on the ballot and the voters decided that, then the voters decided that. But much like Denny, I think that voters should always be paramount in what we're doing, not only in the leaders, but what's best for their community. And sometimes by boxing yourself into a certain number of terms, then, as Laura mentioned, you got you've had somebody and you're happy with how things are going, the community's happy, that they've been here 2, or they've been here 3, whatever that limit is. Now, even if you wanted them to stay, they can't stay. They're gone. And who takes over for them? It's a challenge and maybe detrimental to the city as a whole. And the voters, I think, have the best perspective to do that. And then the only last point, and I'm going to try to be as diplomatic as I can, but when you get people in these offices, women in particular, or minority members, it also depends on how they're treated and their perception of how they're treated. And if they don't feel that they're being treated respectfully or the same as the other members on the board or the commission or whatever the scenario is, then how encouraging is that for others, either for them to run again or for others to follow in their footsteps? Those things are concerning to me, and I actually did the list, and there's 10. You were right on. There were 10 former female,
Was
10
it?
former
Yeah.
plus Laura. Laura is in the 10, because some of them were both council president and council persons.
Right.
But if you talk to some of those council persons now, they will share stories, females, that they were not treated very respectfully when they were here. So that plays into it too. It's one thing to attract them, but another thing to keep them. Now, I'll also mention that, there have been a number of folks, Mike Ryan's a good example. He used to work for the battered women's shelter. Now he's doing security, and he was on the Charter Review Commission. He did come to a number of meetings, both finance and council, and he had an interest. But then, I don't want to use the word fizzled out, I think he just got too busy because he's working a full-time job for a hospital security group, and then on his off days or off hours, he's driving for Uber. So he's trying to manage a full-time and a part-time
I didn't
job.
understand who you said.
Uber.
No, Mike
Oh,
Ryan.
Mike
Joe.
Ryan. Mike Ryan, yeah.
Okay.
He's been to council meetings.
Yeah.
He's been
He's
here.
sitting in the back there.
Yeah, yeah, and you can tell he's absorbing, he's appreciating, he's understanding, he's asking questions at the end. But he was one that reached out to me and said, how can I get more involved? So he came to the committee meetings first, when the opportunity came up for the charter review. He served on that, and then we had to remove him, ask him to resign from the charter review, because if you serve on that, you can't serve on any other committees, which in my mind, we may want to consider whether we want to change that or not, because you meet for 3 or 4 months, and then you can't be on anything else for 5 years. Well,
Right.
I've told people, just get yourself off the committee, now they can put you on something else. So he's on the record retention committee now, because we lost Charlie Clark, and we needed a resident representative. So Mike is doing that for us now. Yeah, and I kind of feel like that's almost a gateway into some of these things, get them exposed, give them a chance to talk to some of the different people that are here at the city, and then if they want to take that next step of running. But as you all know, not this side, but those of us that have run for office, it's time consuming, it's financially challenging at times, and some people don't want to put themselves out there, and somebody starts digging through things you did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and pretty soon things are flying out, and a lot of people don't want that exposure or potential for exposure.
One of the other complicating factors, and we're great at this, and I think the past many years have been great, we understand that nothing's personal. We attack ideas, don't attack people, and we try to keep it on attacking ideas, and we can go after each other on an idea, and after that it's over, you say, well, either you win or lose, and that's just the way it is.
Unless you're in a budget hearing.
That's only the department.
That's where your mic
Then you
raise.
lose.
But anyway.
Denny?
A suggestion, which I think has been a great asset, even though Laura's only been on for a couple months, but especially the committees, when spots become available, to have business leaders like Laura and Brian, where they can get involved on these different committees, and can make, I think, can make a big difference. So, I mean, I just think that maybe that's one suggestion that we could use to maybe after, like John said, after being, or the mayor, after being on a committee, and you start to feel a passion for it, maybe those people would be interested in running for council.
I think there are a lot of good ideas, and like I said, we can't, because we're so formal, I mean, like I said, we can't just get together and go out and have dinner and have these discussions. So it seemed like a good opportunity, and it's really interesting, I think, I don't know, it's very interesting to me, to just have each of us be able to talk about an issue that, it's a fairly big issue, but really what you get out of it, a lot of it is like, why do you want to do what you do? Why are you here? Like you were saying, why are we here? What drove you here? Which is pretty interesting, and I think that the mentoring part of it, the coming up through a committee, but I also think a more overt, maybe pronounced effort at the mentoring part to look at people that we could bring in. We get all busy, and it's hard to come up with folks, like the mayor said, do you want to do this, and do you have time? But the concern, for me anyway, the concern remains that we are doing a really good job. I mean, this is the most exciting thing you can imagine doing. Like Denny said, the projects that we have going, it makes you not want to leave. You don't want to give up. You'd like to see, I'd like to see the things built where, on that property where we tore down the theater before I'm going, you think, I'd like to see that, and then the next one comes up, and you think, I'd like to see this one too. And because our government works so well, and things are cooperative, and like John said, not just cooperative, but it's not personal. We don't have a partisan political agenda sitting next to each other that's paramount to what we do. And I think that makes it, so for me, I'm thinking, I'd love to do this. Why don't you want to, why don't the rest of you want to come and do it? But I think it's good to be able to have a discussion and talk about this, and then know where we can go. And obviously, if term limits is not going to be it, but we can think about it. We can individually all think about it, try to bring other folks into the process. And I think to me, that's worth an hour. And I really appreciate you guys coming. Brian, do you want to jump in there while you're back there? No? Chief?
You should be term limits on dogs, though.
Jonathan?
I just said that in my time here with the boards and commissions, the regulatory boards and commissions, I've been actively trying to get diversity of age, gender, experience, and everything. So I think, the suggestions I've had to the mayor for appointments in the 4 years I've been here, I think are getting to that, to that piece. So
To Jonathan's point, there's a gentleman on the planning commission, okay, who I used to drive back and forth to hockey practice. Now he's sitting next to me on the commission. So he's definitely getting the age gap covered.
No, that's good. That's good.
Exactly, it is.
And I like John Coyne's idea of maybe advertising a weekend day for people that would be interested in working with city government. See how many people show up.
Well, you do
It
it
could be,
for,
for council, committees.
you do it for third grade?
We do. I will tell you, the one comment I get every time we do it is, there's a parent usually sitting there and said, gosh, we should do this for adults. I now understand what goes on here from listening to you talk to third graders. So
Wouldn't it be kind of fun though if we did plan out far enough that you could do it? We could, maybe an evening even, where you could do kind of what you and the mayor do with third graders, kind of, not exactly that, like put them in seats and put hats on them, but, do something like that and have a talk and say it is because we want you to understand about it, and we are, we want people that are active and engaged, and we have committee appointments and other things come up, we'd like to know you're here.
Yeah.
I
Have a
think it'd be
member from
fun.
each committee that we have, in the city, and members from council, and have them each explain what we do, and then take questions and see how many people get involved. I think that's a great idea, John.
But even if you did pattern it after what Jim developed for the third graders. Because if you ask your average person who's never been involved in public service, their idea of what council does and their authority and their responsibility versus the administrations and how there are all these checks and balances that, you know, so many people think that, you know, the mayor just wants to hire somebody and he just does it. You're the CEO, you just do it, you know. I don't understand that, you know, we've got job descriptions, we've got the number of people, we've got the money, and we share with the third graders how important that is. Because if you get somebody in that position that just wants to hire, you know, 50 police officers, you know, how are you going to sustain something like that? So that's why there's checks and balances. Or a mayor that's going to appoint a police chief because the guy helped out with his campaign and has no police experience whatsoever. We use that example precisely. But if you ask Joe Citizen, they would think he's the mayor. That's who he wants. You know, he can just do that, because they don't know that there's a council check and balance on those things. And I actually feel, I mean, I'm sure it happens with Jim because he's been doing it much longer than I have, but I'll have children now in the high school that have come through the third grade program, or I'll be at Walmart or Bueller's or whatever, and they'll say, hey, you know, I'll ask them what grade they're in because, you know, I don't know how many years ago it was, and they may not remember the exact position name, but they either knew they were in the big chairs up front and they made a law, or they were the person in charge of parks, or they were the person in charge of bringing new businesses in. They knew what their position was, and I think just that active participation helps them retain the information. And they all learn from one another, including the teachers have heard it a number of times. They could probably take over if one of us was sick, but the parents, you know, find it interesting as well. Sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's grandparents.
I think it's a great idea. I think that's something we can follow up on that. Chief, did you have your?
I did. I think what some of you have described is similar to our Citizens Police Academy. And I know some local municipalities here in the state of Ohio have developed their own curriculum for a Citizens Council Academy or a Citizens Government Academy. Maybe not as in-depth as our police academy, Citizens Police Academy may be, but maybe 3 weekends where you set aside an hour or 2 hours where you can give presentations and describe exactly what it is that you do and the committee assignments, and it may be something I'd be interested in attending. I do agree with what the mayor said as well. We're finding here in the police department, it's difficult to find people to engage in public service. We're having difficulties finding applicants that want to come and take our test and want to be police officers or work in the public safety field or public service field. When I started here in 1997, I think there were 300 people that took the test along with me. Nowadays, we're getting 40, 50 individuals that are taking our civil service tests. I think two issues that you have to have is the desire and then the initiative. And as Mr. Rose's story, where they pulled a petition, they had the desire, but they didn't have the initiative to follow through. And I think if you have the desire, the initiative, that in most cases equal the passion to follow through and seek that office.
It's a great analogy, actually, with the police academy, the junior police academy. That's a great analogy.
So to carry that just a little bit further, so 40 today, in 1997, 20 years ago, 382, 83, 500, 600. We were at the high school gymnasium. Brunswick, same thing, 600, 700. That's what we were given the test.
Is that when you came? Is that when you took it?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was the volume. And when I talked to the high school civics classes after that, I said, you know, we talk about a competitive exam. Let me tell you what a competitive exam is. You have to get, at that time it was the top 3, it wasn't the top 10 like it is now. The state broadened it, and we did the same thing to give us more of an opportunity to see more candidates. But if you think of your chances with 600 people taking the test, and you getting up in the top 3 to be considered.
3?
Yes, sir. That's what it was back when you were appointed.
Really?
Yes, sir. Right.
I remember that.
There is something I was just thinking about, I'm in Kiwanis, and we try so hard. Our membership was at 120, and it's probably down to 40 now, and 25 that are active, but it's hard to get people to join a service club.
But isn't that
It is.
it's a social, it's been like a tectonic shift in what social things, what people
Yes.
do. They don't go to lunch Kiwanis, they don't,
Right.
you're not a Mason. You don't do those things that were done, as recently as 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's no longer. I mean, well, my wife is in King's Daughters, and
Right.
the majority of those people are like pushing 90. Get a young person into a group of people that are 90, that's a tough.
Well, in the
That's-
evening Rotary is going to a dinner club only, just
Yeah.
because they can't get the members to sustain themselves.
Well, listen, I don't know if you have anything else, but I appreciate everybody coming, and I do, in your comments, all good. And I'd like to do this, like I said, I think it's good for us to share these kind of ideas, and we don't have the pressure of, okay, vote, where it's gonna go someplace. And truthfully, I don't know where the recording goes, but it's really nice that there's no media, that we're just here, and we can have this discussion kind of free of having it written down. Personally, I've never been I like publicity, but I've never been a fan of like publicized meetings on TV, and because I think it changes the dynamic of conversation a lot when you're not having a conversation like we're having now. But I appreciate your honesty too, and we can consider all these things down the road, short term limits. Move to adjourn. Do we have to do that?
You called it to order, so yeah, I guess so.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm good.
That's worth it.